Before he disappeared, Mitch McConnell had a telling nickname.
Leader McConnell seems to take great pride in calling himself the Grim Reaper.
It's a moniker McConnell does indeed seem to relish, even selling a Grim Reaper t-shirt on his campaign website.
Can anyone find me that t-shirt? Mitch McConnell is allegedly still alive, but let's face it, he's probably never coming back to the Senate. Why is this happening? What does it all mean? I'm Amanda Marcotte, and we'll have some answers on this special episode of Standing Room Only. Mitch McConnell has a long history of dirty tricks. So, of course, progressives suspect that something is up with him and his wife. It's been 2 months since the Kentucky senator disappeared into a hospital, and all we've seen of him is these 2 proof-of-life photos. So, I guess he's among the breathing. Yes, his wife Elaine Chao is grabbing his arm like she's afraid he'll tip over. And yes, his smile is odd. It's like he doesn't know what's going on or even what a camera is. It's not surprising that these weird photos made the conspiracy theories even worse.
Where is the truth? They put out a picture, they stripped it of its metadata. Now, when we take pictures normally, it records where it was, what time it was, what the exposure was, which, all these details, we don't have any of that.
I don't think that Mitch McConnell is alive. The ambulance didn't look like it was in a big hurry to get to the hospital.
He says, my doctors have confirmed I didn't break any bones or suffer a concussion. I didn't have a heart attack or a stroke. EMS, the people responsible for saving your life, say you had a cardiac arrest and that CPR was in progress. I don't know what's going on, but I don't trust anybody anymore.
Yeah.
I trust nobody for nothing.
Yeah, no, I remember back when I was a single guy, I'd always get in trouble for, trying to perform CPR on women, and they say, I'm not having a heart attack. What are you doing? Stop it.
What? He was probably just sitting there waiting for her to finish, feeling like I have a sleazy joke about touching women's boobs. The 84-year-old senator hasn't been seen or spoken in public since he was hospitalized in mid-June. All his team will say is that he fell and was briefly unconscious. Have you ever been briefly unconscious? It's not good. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear wrote a public letter noting that the doctor's statement doesn't say anything about McConnell's actual condition. The doctor won't even say if he can speak or reason. He's supposedly in a rehab center, but he still won't step down. It's not crazy to think that he's doing this for nefarious reasons. Mitch basically stole a Supreme Court seat from Barack Obama in 2016 and gave it to Donald Trump. He is why the filibuster went from barely being used to being an all-out weapon. He used legislative tricks to stack the courts with conservative judges. If anybody would be scheming from a hospital bed, it would be Mitch McConnell. But I don't think this is about screwing over the Democrats. As my friend Lindsay Byerstein wrote at MS Now, all this means is that the GOP is down a vote in a closely divided Senate. Still, let's not be too hard on the conspiracy theorists because, duh, Mitch and Elaine really seem like they're hiding something.
You spoke with Mitch McConnell today. What did you talk about? What did he say?
Yeah, he called me this morning before I did my radio show. We talked for about 17 minutes. He talked a lot about the situation with Iran, talked a little bit about Ukraine and what's going on in Europe. I told him I'd been to the Teddy Roosevelt Library. We talked a little bit about the history of the vice presidency.
Did you ask him how he was feeling?
Yeah, he said he was feeling okay, obviously well enough to call me on the phone.
But I find most unusual about this is the fact that the whereabouts of McConnell's wife is unknown at this point. She was last confirmed to be in Beijing meeting with China's vice president on June 17th. That's 3 days after McConnell was taken to the hospital.
His wife, Elaine Chao, emerges to accept some bizarre award without her husband. She didn't mention her husband once in this long acceptance speech she gave.
The likeliest reason for this is also the most pathetic. It's hard for these powerful old men and their families to let go. In 2024, Democrats lost what should have been a winnable election, all because Joe Biden wouldn't leave until it was too late. But now you have Trump floating the idea of a third term, even though he's 80 years old and not doing well.
I won 3 times Now I'm going to do it again.
This is a video of a cabinet meeting literally from last month where Donald Trump is sleeping while you are talking. Please show this video.
A coalition of countries that line up behind the peace deal, behind the border peace, and it's still every day is a challenge.
And I'm proud to officially name the undisputed. Just when did this come out?
To be fair, I also sleep when Marco Rubio is talking. It's hard for these politicians to retire. When you're in office, people follow you around and take your picture and hang on your every word. Politicians famously love attention. They don't want to give that up just so they can golf more. It's silly to pretend that these cover-ups are implausible. If anything, they're becoming the new norm. Representative Kay Granger just died at age 83. She was in a dementia ward 4 months before anybody said anything. Senator Dianne Feinstein also died in office, but before then she was acting all offended when people got concerned at her age, which was 90. 6 members of Congress have died in the past year. Many of them ran for office even though they knew they were dying of cancer. I'll talk about this more during Pass the Mic with my guest, Yale law professor Samuel Moyn. He's written a whole book on the problem of aging politicians. Then there's the families. There's been a lot of focus on Elaine Chao. She went to China. She got an award, all while her husband was hospitalized. And there's been talk about her outfit in the second proof of life photo.
If you look at the 2 photos, so you have July 15th and July 26th, Elaine Chao is wearing the same shirt. And people are speculating that on July 26th, they released a photo from what would be 9 days earlier.
So a family friend of Mitch McConnell's wife is saying he doesn't think that image of her on the right, the new one, is real. He also says Elaine is depicted wearing a $12 Chico's shirt. Holy crap, she would rather die.
If it's true that it is a Chico's shirt, that seems an odd choice for Elaine Chao. Not that there's anything wrong with a Chico's shirt, but she's the daughter of a billionaire. She was a cabinet minister. Mitch McConnell and Elaine Chao have plenty of money. It's an odd choice, and it's an odd choice for her to be wearing it twice.
Look, I'm not convinced the shirt means anything. I also don't wear my nice clothes to the hospital. But we have seen recently how the families of these famous politicians also don't want to give up their status or attention. Look at Jill and Hunter Biden. Both of them played a role in persuading Joe Biden to stay in office. If I'd screwed up like that, I'd take a break from public life for a while. But nah, they're out there making fools of themselves on camera.
I said that I would love to talk to you because, number one, I told you this, is that I think you're really smart.
A stunning admission from former First Lady Jill Biden about then-President Joe Biden's 2024 debate against Donald Trump, saying she feared a medical emergency.
I don't know what happened. I mean, as I watched it, I thought, oh my God, he's having a stroke. And it scared me to death.
I've heard you call me a crackhead many times, and the truth of the matter is I was a crackhead.
Yeah.
And
Good God, Hunter. Just stop. If I ever get so addicted to attention that I play nice with Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens, hold an intervention, please. Look, I get it. I also don't look forward to getting old, and I understand that retiring is hard, especially when you have a glamorous and powerful job like being a politician. But when these politicians act entitled to these jobs, it's hurting democracy. Those offices belong to the people, not to the people sitting in them. It's even worse when Trump is joking about a 3rd term, even though that's illegal. He wants to be a king who gets to die in office. Other politicians are making things worse when they act the same way. We'll be back soon with regular episodes, but this issue is so ridiculous that I had to say something. Mitch McConnell, discernibly human. We better hope he's human, because otherwise he might not die.
Think of me as the Grim Reaper.
I'd like to welcome Samuel Moyn to the program. He's a professor of law and history at Yale and the author of a new book called Gerontocracy in America: How the Old Are Hoarding Power and Wealth and What to Do About It. Welcome to Standing Room Only, Sam.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I just want to start by talking about how old our politicians are. 2 presidents in a row in their 80s. The average age of a senator is in their 60s. Why is this happening?
Well, the background reason is life extension, which is a great thing, and people around the world are enjoying it. And above all, incumbency advantages and private financing of elections. You basically get to stay as long as you want, and our older friends in Congress are definitely doing so.
So a lot of journalists have been trying to figure out what's going on with Senator Mitch McConnell, and they're not really getting good answers.
What's going on with Senator McConnell? We haven't had any updates. Is he doing better? Did he sign that July 28th letter, or was that an auto pen from your office?
What do you find most frustrating about seeing this kind of response from his staff?
There are a number of things that are frustrating, but I just want to begin by saying, even though it's more or less new that our presidents are old, we've really had a long history of senators who are old. You look at a case like Dianne Feinstein, we literally don't know why her staff was choosing the policy positions that they were choosing in voting for her. And that is a tradition that goes back to other old men in Congress, and it's infuriating. We didn't vote for, the chief of staff of Mitch McConnell, and yet that person is wielding the power.
How much of what's going on do you even ascribe to Mitch McConnell, or because we have to hold out the possibility that this is not something that he can decide.
The situation in which there's someone in power who may be incapacitated. That's actually turns out, if we look across, pretty pervasive. That was true in the days of the Politburo, in the Kremlin, in the latter years of the Soviet Union, when there were famously old men. Who knows who was actually in charge, and it might be true in frighteningly more circumstances than we might think.
In this particular case, I think, unlike many of those other ones, people are starting to get really angry about it.
Mitch McConnell owes the people of Kentucky, who are his boss, who have elected him repeatedly, a lot more transparency than this.
Where is he? Yeah, is that your question for him? Yeah.
But I recognize this anger, and I think it's not just about Mitch McConnell. I think that there's something bigger going on. How does it impact ordinary people when these elderly politicians are functionally unable to do their job?
Well, first, I do think we should give a little grace up to a point. Everyone gets sick. The voters did choose, and across the country have chosen, often because they don't have good options, a lot of old men and women who they then must assume are going to be at risk for some of these kinds of things. But I would flag a few, objections, and they're systemic. Assuming that Mitch McConnell is alive, we're just unable to do things like recall his seat and replace him. And we need to think constitutionally about what we do, since our Constitution doesn't take into consideration these risks. Folks don't just drop dead as readily, and our doctors can keep them alive more indefinitely, and give them higher functioning for a very long time, but also expose our political system to new risks. The biggest problem with aging politicians doesn't lie there, though. Even when they're healthy and high functioning, the demography of Congress is so out of whack with the demography of the country.
Yeah, there's two kind of separate threads going on here that are really interesting. Old people as voters and constituents punch above their weight. I think, what was the statistic that primary voters are average age 75 years old? I think that came from your book.
In some states like New Mexico, it's reached as high as 72 years old, and it's routinely in the 60s.
Yeah, and so that's obviously a lot older than the average age of Americans, and so their interests and their concerns and people who look like them have an outsized presence in our representation. But then, to your point, when the founders wrote the Constitution, obviously they didn't anticipate that people would live long times in incapacitated states, because that just didn't really happen back then to the same degree.
I do want to mention the founders were well aware of the risk of incapacitation, because it's not like there were no old people. New York State had a law that there were age limits for judges, and Alexander Hamilton, who was from New York, writes a whole Federalist paper in favor of letting old people stay old judges for the good of the country, even though there were famous cases then of old judges who, you know, lost their marbles. It's kind of striking that we still haven't learned our lesson in that regard.
I want to show you another clip because I think one of the most prominent examples of how older people are punching above their weight in politics is in the housing debate. If you can't afford an apartment, folks, part of the reason is every time they try to build a new building, a bunch of old people show up at a city council meeting and say, no more building in our neighborhood.
Affordable housing is necessary. I think we all agree with that, but not at the expense of the quality of the people living in the neighborhood currently.
This project is way out of scale.
These are not people who actually live in the area.
89 units in 7 stories violates the concept of residential.
You don't be disruptive. Excuse me.
Why is this happening?
Because they're rich enough to do so and they have time. Older people not just have more time, they have a vested interest in the stasis of their neighborhood. They're the ultimate NIMBY. The age of those who go to zoning meetings, which insanely we do at the local level, is extremely old. And the consequences of that are tragic because older people going to those meetings are blocking supply, as you pointed out, not just for themselves, but for everyone. I think worst of all, those same folks showing up at the meetings are making sure that property taxes are low and that they, as senior citizens, have specific age-related exemptions from property tax. And that means that the city is also underfunded in doing things, not just like planning new housing, but in paying for children's education. And so we have like a gerontocracy that wouldn't be that bad, I think, if it were just old politicians at risk of cognitive decline and death. Rather, the real problem is the kind of ironclad hold that older people have established over our whole political system and over a lot of policy outcomes.
It's not that old people bad, because we're all going to become old and they were once young. It's just that there are all these structural issues that make it so that old people are protective of the power that they've accrued over a lifetime and they're not willing to share. How do we change that?
Well, I think we need a movement, consciousness raising, which I'm trying to promote along with a lot of other people, and a political movement that, as you suggest, is not about ageism or hating old people. I'm pretty old myself, but really more about intergenerational solidarity. The old should want to be part of a future they're not going to see, and they should want a process of succession to the next generation that is fairer, where we're literally not just waiting on like a death watch situation with a lot of these politicians, but with, those who are aging and are hoarding. And I totally get that we will have an incentive to hoard when we fear that our families, let alone the state, won't take care of us when we're living indefinitely longer. But that's an incentive, I think, to change our whole policy landscape so that we can give more caring and love to older people and say, we get your plight, but you also can't respond to that plight by wrecking the system for everyone else and blocking opportunity for those who are middle-aged, let alone younger.
Awesome. Great place to leave it. Thank you so much, Sam. And the book is called Gerontocracy in America, How the Old Are Hoarding Power and Wealth and What to Do About It. Thank you again for coming on to Standing Room Only.
Thank you. I'm very grateful.
And don't forget to like and subscribe and come back in September. We'll have regular episodes for you then. And stick around for Encore. I have a song dedication for Mitch McConnell. Hey y'all, coming to you from Latchkey. That's my partner's record store in Philadelphia. And my song recommendation, I'd like to dedicate this one to Mitch McConnell, if he can still listen to music. It's the last song on Charli XCX's new album, Music, Fashion, and Film. This album rules. The last song is called No One Lasts Forever, and it is, I gotta say, it's just so gorgeous and strange and weird. The whole album really impressed me. It's very short. It's like a 30-minute, kind of rock, kind of contemplative, definitely a bedroom album as far as Charli would ever do one of those. There's still like some danceable stuff on there. But this last song, No One Lasts Forever, is obviously her reaction in a lot of ways to having Brat just blow up, I think, well beyond what she ever expected it to. I think she's a little stunned by the success that she's experienced in the past couple of years and is starting to think about how overblown fame is, how status seeking and wanting all of that can be very empty and leave you very empty. And so this last song is actually about how, well, no one lasts forever, but also how art doesn't last forever. Like even the greatest artists of all time will one day fade away and will be forgotten. And certainly she knows that she as a pop star is not going to last as long as Shakespeare. But it is a great album, and I think it's well worth listening to over and over again. And I think it's a message that we should all take to heart, that no one, nothing, I don't care how powerful you are, I don't care how important you are, no one lasts forever. If you want more Standing Room Only episodes, please click the subscribe button below. Standing Room Only started as a newsletter, and it's free to read. Click the link to subscribe. I love tips. These political battles are playing out in your communities, your towns, your neighborhoods, your schools. If you have a story, please drop me a line or leave it in comments.